When my son was 21, he helped me make a video about alexithymia. A year later, he took his life because of alexithymia. It just got real.
Oh, wow.
Howdy, I'm David Page. I am autistic and ADHD as my son was. I also have alexithymia. Um, Thomas Henley here is made a video about alexithymia. Now, I haven't watched the video. This very first part, I've kind of skipped ahead to where he does start to get into it. So I want to hear about his experiences and so forth, and make my own comparison and commentary concerning that. So again, this is Thomas Henley. This is Unraveling Alexithymia, the key to meltdown prevention. And let me show it to you here. Oh, well, anyway. Oh, okay, there we go. We can see it there. All right, nonetheless, let's move right along and get into it.
Life. And I've been trying to think about all the reasons to why I feel this way. And it was only until probably a few years ago that I came across the idea of alexithymia. I do want to point out, I'm not a registered psychotherapist, so a lot of what I'm going to be talking about in the concept of sort of the context of alexithymia is going to be from my own experiences and my own ways of understanding the experience of alexithymia.
Now, my son and I, we talked about alexithymia years before we knew what it was, and I describe it as having two brains. There's the brain, my brain, the brain that I think with and that I will my own self. And then there's the other brain, the autistic brain. Because the autism doesn't care about what I think. It does what it wants to.
Yeah. Basically, it's a difficulty both noticing and categorizing one's emotions. So noticing it, being able to tell you're feeling angry perhaps, or categorizing it. Knowing that somewhat your emotional state's changed, but not really sure in what exact way. The important thing to highlight here, for anybody who still believes the whole autistic people don't have emotions or empathy myth, I still experience emotions, and these still impact my behavior, my thoughts, and my body, my physiological bodily response to emotion. And in my mind, it's best viewed as a threshold condition. If you can see right at the bottom of this little presentation thing that I've got going on, you'll be able to see some lines, and I'm going to use this graph to explain a lot of the different concepts in my life related to alexithymia and sort of give some kind of graphical description of what it might
We
be
must
like in order to make it
we must love graphs, because I've got several that I made up that I'll be showing you. A few visual aids.
a little bit more consumable. Each of these lines, these dotted lines, are awarenesses. So for me, as an autistic person with alexithymia, my awareness is, my awareness threshold is pretty high. So I need a high degree of emotion in order to tell that I'm feeling it and in order to characterize it. Whereas for most people, it might look a bit lower. And again, I'm not going to be really anal about like the numbers that we're putting on and percentages and all that, because obviously it's going to vary a lot person to person. But let's go on to the first thing. Why are we alexithymic? So in autistic people, the rates of alexithymia is much, much higher. I'm not going to go into the specifics about the percentages because...
So alexithymia is an inability to feel and or identify emotions. Okay? So, for instance, me and my son, we experience emotions for sure, but when we do, they're way too much. I think of it a lot as like Spock, where Spock would subdue his emotions, but he was still human. And that's where the autism side comes in, and the alexithymia and so forth. It gets overwhelming. We either experience basically no emotion whatsoever or extreme emotion. And I mean totally extreme. I used to say that if I dropped a pencil, it could be just as devastating to me as losing a child. And I have lost a child, and it still remains true.
There's not been that much research done on it, and the percentages tend to vary a lot when it comes to autism studies, but it's pretty high. The interesting thing is that it's also caused by trauma, PTSD, complex PTSD. Kind of makes you think, is this something which is inherent to the experiences of autistic people? Or is it created from our own experiences? Because autistic people are indeed disproportionately affected by a lot of negative life experience.
I think it's neurological, personally. And PTSD can cause neurological issues. PTSD literally changes the brain. It can be seen in the brain in certain brain scans.
Alongside a lot of mental illness. Kind of makes you think, and it's something that I'm still trying to understand, trying to find some information about. But for me, as far back as I can remember, I've been alexithymic. You may have heard of the Myers-Briggs test, that sort of 16 personalities thing. I'm not going to go into like the legitimacy of it or anything, but when I was younger, I took that test and I was given the thinker archetype, because ever since I was very young, I've been very much the more logical type of person. I used to think that logic was superior to emotions, and that emotions were just these annoying, niggly, like, impacting things on my life that I wanted to get rid of. And emotions were a lot more unpredictable, a lot more grey.
And the thing is people tend to conflate emotion with caring. So just because I don't necessarily experience emotion at a given time does not mean that I don't care. So if say my dog gets run over and emotionally I'm just not attached to it, or I'm not feeling emotion over that for whatever reason. That doesn't mean that I don't care. My dog just died. I definitely care, but I may not feel emotions, or I may experience inappropriately overwhelming emotions, and it's going to be one or the other. It's nowhere. It's never in between. It's either way too much emotion or no emotion at all.
Subjective, and so it was quite hard for me to wrap my head around exactly like what these emotions are and try to understand them properly. So let's go into the idea of me having coloured personalities. What exactly was going on there? Why is this something that I experienced, this weird characterization of who I am as a person, as having these different personalities that just kind of impose themselves on me at different parts of the day? You can imagine sort of at the left-hand side, that being my baseline. Along the way,
I wouldn't call it different personalities. I would think of it more as experiencing emotions or not, and that appearing to have different personalities. It's the same person. It's just that all of a sudden the emotions are overwhelming. So that's going to definitely change your behaviors.
Of getting perhaps very angry and irritated, I may get to a point at which I would consider myself to have a red personality, because my behavior is changing, the way that I'm interacting with people is changing. I'm looking a bit more moody, I'm a bit more withdrawn, I'm a bit more short and direct and blunt. My thoughts are circling around something which I don't particularly like that someone did. So I would characterize myself as being a red personality, but I wasn't particularly at the point of feeling the anger. People would often be able to tell I was angry or upset way before I was able to actually tell that I was angry. And usually that would anger me more and sort of push me over the edge so that I could actually tell that I was angry. It was like, oh, you seem angry. It's like, I'm not angry. So I'm angry now, I could see I was actually thinking.
Now, one thing about emotions that I found very interesting, after I discovered I was autistic at 50, I realized that I thought if someone says let's say someone ran over my dog, okay, I did not realize that people have an emotion, a very specific emotion, say sadness because the dog died. And I thought what it was you experienced good or bad. And I'll show you this in just a little bit. But I thought it was good or bad. And what you did is you said, okay, I feel bad. My dog died. Therefore, my emotion is sadness. I didn't know that it was, I feel sad. I feel this emotion because my dog died. I thought it was a description of the situation, not the emotion. I didn't understand that. I just, because I experience them good or bad. I can't describe what emotion it is. I may not know what emotion it is. I use the situation, and I'm half a century old. I can pretty much figure out what the word to put to the situation to describe good or bad, so that it's appropriate, so that others can understand.
Thinking differently, but I didn't feel different. What about my sort of behaviors, the things I did? Because one of the main things that I used to do as a young autistic kid was listen to very emotional, sad music. As you can see, that sort of orange line that I have at the top is my awareness, my emotional awareness. For a lot of people, they might be able to tell a little bit lower down that they are feeling sad. I need to listen to something which kind of amplifies my feelings enough.
And I think what he's going to be saying here is that his feelings are just straight across here, and that other people experience these peaks and the lower parts also. I think that's what he's going to say.
So that I could notice them. Quite often I've had a difficulty with expressing emotion and expressing sadness. I think probably as a result of medication, and also a result of depression, primarily a result of alexithymia. So you can imagine this red line is sort of me feeling sad. I'm pretty sad. Like, I'm going over that kind of 50% sort of number. I'm not feeling the best. I'm feeling like a little bit glum. But
after this video, your life is never going to be the same. So I need you to stop whatever.
I don't notice that I am. It's just expressing in my behavior. Generally, like, the best way to process sadness is to let it out. Is to cry. Is to get upset. Because after you get upset and you think about it while you're upset, your brain sort of processes the emotions. You feel a little bit better after you've done so. For me, with that sort of blue line, I would listen to sad music, which would kind of tip me over the edge and make me cry, make me get upset. And it kind of feels like a very strange thing to do, to want to feel sadness, but due to my experiences with alexithymia, it can sometimes feel like I'm just not reacting in the way that other people do to things.
And I don't like to experience emotions at all because they're so overwhelming that I just would rather not have them.
Things that should make me feel sad, and sort of let that sadness out in a cathartic way. And it also comes in the other flavor, sort of talking about happiness as well. So at the bottom graph is me talking about my experiences with, like, medication. You know, perhaps I might have a good day, and that line of happiness, or, you know, endogenous endorphins, if you want to call them, or contentness, or bliss, or excitement, props over that line and allows me to feel happy, and I can say at the end of the day, I had a really great day.
Okay, so my son and I came up with a very different type of I guess outlook on this. Let me see if I can bring it up. Okay, so if we look at this graph right here, hopefully this graph will show up here on my. Hopefully everything's working out the way I hope it is. But anyway, if you look at these two graphs here, these different colors represent specific different emotions. Like, this is joy, and we have love and satisfaction and so forth. On the other side, we have the bad emotions. Now, once again, these all have specific colors because they have specific feelings, as I understand it. I don't experience that myself, which I'll show you. Now, so each one of these we can label and say, you know, I feel this way, therefore I am I'm feeling resentment. I can't see this screen as well. So I'm feeling resentment. Now, where it changes is this. It represents a different emotion. Let me go to my next graph here. All right. So now this is how I experience emotions. So we have the good emotions on this side, but it's all the same. It's all good. It's all good, or it's all bad. But there's no specifics. But we do have all these emotions and stuff up here that I can say, well, like I said, my dog died, therefore I got a new puppy, so therefore I feel joy or happiness or whatever. Or maybe my dog died, therefore it feels bad. Therefore, let's see, it's a dog. I probably feel sad. Probably not depression or guilt unless I let it run out in the street or something. So that is how I figure out situationally why I feel bad or why I feel good.
However, taking medication, as I said before, really flattens my mood profile down even more. It reduces the level of happiness I'm able to feel. Not too much that most people might be able to feel that they're happy, but for me, didn't really cross that line. I couldn't really tell. But let's talk about something which I think is the pivotal, kind of more impactful way that alexithymia can impact my life, particularly during those ages, was psychotherapy. As you can imagine, some of the talking tactics that people might use to sort of bring this emotion, bring this experience out of you, doesn't particularly work that well, because you can recall it, you can recall something that's really difficult, something that's bothered you, something that's really caused an impact on your life, but you don't necessarily feel the accompanying emotions, and so you can process it logically.
Or you'll feel inappropriate emotions, and that can happen too.
But not really emotionally. Pretty much the entire time that I went through psychotherapy as a kid, I didn't cry at all. I just didn't open up. I didn't express. So let's go down 3.
And I'm one. I still cry. Well, since my son passed, since last October, I pretty much cried every day, and my emotions are out. Particularly since I've started to unmask, and it's really starting to actually become a problem. Although medications have helped me.
Typical paths that psychologists might take when talking to you about mental health. Tell me about this. So I explained something deeply saddening, deeply impactful on my life, and I'm just normal like this, just chatting, and they ask me, how do I feel? And I say, I'm not sure. Kind of shuts down the conversation there, doesn't it? Because how do you work through
And that's a legitimate answer. I don't know. When you don't know,
something which is impacting you emotionally, if you're not aware of what emotion you're feeling, you can't actually like feel the emotion or tie the emotion to a specific event that's happened. It's quite hard to sort of process those deep-seated feelings from events that have happened if you can't feel it. Number 2, you experience 3 general bad things this week. The psychotherapist might ask you, why do you look so sad? Your response would be, as an alexithymic individual, I just feel sad for no reason. I don't know why I feel sad. Most people might be able to make that connection from the resulting feelings from these.
And when we say we don't know, a neurotypical person is avoiding answering the question, saying, I don't know. But we literally don't know. So we're going to be taken as lying, or trying to be evasive when we say we don't know, when we literally don't know. And neurotypical people have an extremely difficult time understanding that, because they conflate emotions with caring, or emotions with not caring.
Experiences and go, this is the cause of me feeling bad this week. But for me, because I didn't link those, I didn't feel that emotion enough during that time, and I didn't link it to an event that's happened, I don't log it as something considerable on impacting my mood. So I respond with not sure, really. Another situation here, you have a bad experience, you don't log that emotion, someone asks you, how did that make you feel? And you say, I don't know. I don't know how that made me feel. Kind of shuts down a lot of conversations, makes psychotherapy, counseling quite difficult if someone is that heavily alexithymic that you can't connect emotions to events and you cannot feel the emotions from recalling said events.
My son called it emotional numbness, is what he called it.
But let's have a look at sort of strategies, because there's a lot of stuff out there which, you know, is around autism and sort of regulating emotions. We tend to have meltdowns and shutdowns and panic attacks, which can really get in the way of overall functioning and living. So let's have a look at this graph. Okay. So the psychologist might say to you, they might give you a sheet, breathing exercises, actions that you can do when you feel your anxiety is high, when you feel anxious. So for most people, you can see sort of with that pink line, you've got NT there, which stands for neurotypical, basically someone not alexithymic in this case. They'd be able to tell when their anxiety goes up, say, oh, actually I'm feeling anxious. So they implement the strategy. Goes down. Goes back up, they implement the strategy, goes back down.
That doesn't work
so
for us.
it kind of works for them. For me, for an
Doesn't.
alexithymic individual,
It doesn't really
it
work.
would be more along the lines of, okay, I don't know, maybe I feel different, I'm not too sure, and it just kind of goes on like that, to the point where I am able to tell that I'm anxious. But the problem there, when I feel this, and I can characterize this as being anxiety, I'm already on my way to like having a meltdown, having a shutdown, just having a very strong emotional response. And so trying to break away from that intense feeling to do something like a breathing exercise, something like that, it's not always going to work.
It's not,
very well.
no.
In fact, most situations, it kind of makes you lose faith in the whole process.
It's a good idea, but good ideas don't always work.
So people say, like, just use the strategies when you feel stressed. Keywords there.
When do I feel
stressed?
stressed?
How do you know if you're alexithymic? That's the problem. Just breathe when you feel stressed. Ah, okay, great.
Okay, so I want to explain this in a slightly different way. This is I think of my emotions as a volcano, and this is a neurotypical person here, and as you can see, those emotions are deep down inside or whatever, and then something happens or whatever, and there's more and more tension, and eventually this person pops, and they get pissed off, and they I don't know, they kick the dog or whatever terrible thing they're gonna do. But for me, it's quite a bit different. For me, it's more like this. That volcano is up here all the time, and you don't ever know when that crust is going to break or what is going to break that crust, because those emotions are always ready to go at any point in time. It doesn't mean that you're upset or that you're having a bad day or anything else. It's just that those emotions are always ready to go. And so for the little slightest thing that happens, boom, you can have a meltdown. And you may not know the reason why you're having that meltdown. Who's that good looking guy? Whew. That one good looking fella right there. I gotta say.
I can't really breathe because I'm hyperventilating, you know, at this moment. Just take breaks when you feel stress. Okay, I'm going to go throughout the whole day just working until I feel stressed, which just gets to a point where, again, I have a panic attack, I have a meltdown. Anxiety rises to a point which I need someone else's support to help me lower my anxiety to get to a more comfortable, less anxious place.
I usually work it out on my own because I've always had to work it out on my own. I mean, he was 10 years old and knew he was autistic, so there was a little bit of... He had something to work with. I never did. I had no idea, and nobody else seemed to.
Very helpful. Let's go into a little bit more about why the strategies might not work. You can imagine the pink line. It's kind of the NT experience. As again, you can see sort of the emotional awareness thresholds that one might experience. Trying to implement these strategies is quite difficult because every time that I try to implement them, it's too late. So I go up, my anxiety becomes at a point where I'm aware, and it's way too much. I have a meltdown, and then it drops all the way back down. And maybe the next time, I might be able to catch it in time, do those exercises, calm myself down. But it's not consistent. Whereas for the person who isn't alexithymic, they'd be able to tell. They'd be able to do it in time and keep themselves
Because
at a manageable
an idea where their emotions actually are
level of anxiety. These darn
and what they are.
stupid, useless breathing exercises. My God, I didn't see any benefits at all from doing these breathing exercises. I found that, you know, when I did them, perhaps I didn't have meltdowns, but I didn't really feel any different. And the reason for that is due to my emotional awareness. It was just a bit higher. If I have intervals or planned breaks where I breathe and I sort of regulate myself through breathing, I wouldn't really be able to tell that I was anxious in the first place and not be able to tell really what the effect of that breathing exercise was because it was so minute. Even though it was helping me and sort of keeping me level, I wasn't aware of it. It was just this constant thing. Whereas for most people, they'd be able to tell when they're getting a little bit anxious and how the breathing exercises reduce it to a point where they feel okay. This thought came back to me on one of the streams that we did. We did the Wim Hof breathing method, which is basically a more intense version of anxiety-reducing breathing exercises. You breathe really quickly, hyperventilating to increase your adrenaline, increase your cortisol, activate your sympathetic, your fight and flight nervous system.
Which is what I definitely don't need. That's my fight or flight response. I think in the alexithymia have a lot of correlation.
To a point where you feel quite panicked and you feel quite anxious, but then you do strategies to reduce it and you hold your breath. By going through different cycles of doing this, you end up feeling a lot more chilled, a lot more relaxed than you were when you started. Now
I use marijuana. That's what I do.
tell that had an impact on me because it was intense. So if you can imagine this blue graph at the bottom, the spikes would be way up. So my anxiety, it would rise my anxiety all the way up to a point where I could tell it was there and then drop it down to a considerable amount and then rise it back up and drop it down even more and then drop it down even more on the last one. And so I could actually tell, and I was thinking to myself, okay, so breathing exercises do work because this is just an extreme version of regular old breathing exercises. So if you are finding that you don't really see much change from doing breathing exercises, it definitely does. It's a scientific proven fact. It definitely does help you. It just might not be as noticeable to you than to most people. But I've talked a lot about the difficulties of alexithymia and the ways that it can impact us. Let's talk about two ways that I found that have been useful for me managing my stress, my anxiety, my emotions throughout the day. This is what I deem the blanket method, which basically consists of things that you do daily that reduce anxiety or at intervals throughout the day. So for example, you can see sort of at the bottom, that sort of yellow strip, you have sensory supports, allowing yourself to stim, really important one, having a stable, healthy diet, not too many sugars to sort of spike your blood sugar up and down, having a sense of routine and certainty to each.
Particularly for PDA people like myself, is giving yourself putting yourself in a position that you feel like you're in control of yourself and control of your destiny, and that's a huge part of the PDA profile.
Each part of your day. Generally, all of this stuff has a good positive effect on me, and it might for you too.
And the PDA profile is a pathological demand avoidance, is what that stands for.
But there can also be these sort of intervals that we can do that could be things related to having daily exercise. For me, the gym, massively important. And in an ideal world, I would probably get myself a massage, you know, and then have a planned break at the end of the day to regulate, to be in a space and listen to music and de-stress, de-anxiety from, you know, the stresses of the day that's just happened. And although I can't really tell if it's having an impact on me. It doesn't really make much difference because I'm not getting to the point where I'm having panic attacks and meltdowns. So it definitely has to be viewed, if you're using these blanket methods, consistently over time. And you've got to monitor, like, am I getting to points where I'm too overwhelmed, where I'm too stressed? Am I getting to those points less often than I used to? If so, you're probably doing something right. Basically, this whole idea of a blanket method is that it helps reduce your anxiety and stress through planned activities, supports, and lifestyle changes. And these, for me, have definitely been extremely helpful. The only problem with this approach is that it doesn't always help in extreme situations or novel situations. New places, new things that you're going to do, new activities, new changes to your life.
And I plan for those changes, and when I do, I also plan for uncertainty, and that is part of the plan. So because I know things are going to be uncertain, that it becomes part of the plan, that it is going to be uncertain and that I'm going to wing it. And for some reason, that just helps me to deal with it a little better.
Doesn't always help with that. But let's talk about the other side of things, which is the more complex one, but does have a lot of utility for those extreme and novel situations. And this is something that I've been working on myself for a long time, trying to understand. This is what I deem alexithymic awareness. Emotional awareness, is probably the same, probably makes a bit more sense, but so let's give the example of anxiety just to give some semblance of like applicability to how this might work. Basically, for me, other than feeling that emotion, there are 3 areas of change that happen to me when I'm feeling any said emotion. Bodily signs, behavior changes noticed by both myself and other people, and also thought distortions, thought changes. What am I thinking about? Where am I focusing, etc.? I can usually tell that I'm anxious.
I usually become more reserved, and I end up trying, at least if I can, I'll isolate if possible.
When my legs start to hurt, when they feel uncomfortable, like there's ants crawling on their bones, when they feel tense. You might be able to notice if you've got like a Fitbit, heart rate monitor, or you take your own heart rate. You might be able to notice that your heart rate is higher than usual. That might be another indicator. Also, gut issues. You're finding a lot of issues related to your GI tracts. I'm not going to go too much into that, you know what I mean.
But the thing is well, just like this, probiotics. Take probiotics; they definitely help.
I get physical tics, similar to what people might see as like Tourette syndrome, but I'm not diagnosed with Tourette syndrome because it's not consistent enough, and I don't have enough tics for it to be considered that. So I haven't gone for it. And also the amount of stimming that I'm doing, the unconscious stimming that I would be doing during the day. It's not really something that I can isolate myself, but it might be helpful for you. For more complex emotions related to anger, there's not really that many things related to the body other than muscle tension and perhaps feelings of like redness in my face or something. But this could be things related to like how you look on the outside. Like are you starting to make a lot more sort of angry faces? You might not be able to notice, but other people might be able to. So if they tell you you look angry, might be worth just logging it in your brain. Maybe not giving them the time of day with it.
And that gives you an opportunity to try to figure out what's going on.
If you don't want to, there's feelings of PDA. I know, like when people tell you you are something.
I've got a problem that I'm pretty sure you can help me with. Yes, you will be paid for helping me. Actually,
that you don't feel. I understand that. Could also be related to like your body language. Are you facing away from people? Are you moving away from people? Are you engaging with people less? Are you being more quiet? Are you being louder? Are you isolating yourself off? Experiencing reductions or increases in your own self-esteem? Do you change the subject to different things which you wouldn't usually talk about very much? I might find that if I'm quite angry, I might talk about taekwondo more, or martial arts, or going to the gym because I want to get that energy out. And also like the choice of words that you use could be something very subtle. And the last thing is the thought changes, which sadly other people can't give you much input on, but this could be along the lines of your beliefs and opinions. Your beliefs and opinions might change considerably one moment to another. If you're feeling quite anxious, you might turn from sort of feeling very connected and like people are friends with you to people are not friends with me and people are just treating me this way and they're making fun of me and I'm experiencing all this paranoia. That might be another thing. Could be along the lines of perception as well. Perhaps, you know, if you're feeling a bit more anxious, you tend to be a lot more sort of wired in, perhaps a bit more dissociated, related to the style of thinking that you have. Are you being a lot more straightforward and blunt in your thinking, or are you sort of daydreaming and thinking about lots of things? The speed or order of your thoughts, from very anxious, the speed of my thoughts
I'll tell
increases.
you what, he's making it way over complex for me. For me, I experience emotions or I don't, and all these other things just aren't a factor and aren't even gonna
And
matter at
it
all.
becomes gradually more disordered to the point where it just feels like my brain's just chucking different ideas and concepts and thoughts at me. Could also be something related to your gut reaction. For example, someone approaching you when you're angry, your gut reaction might in most cases be to smile and say hello, how you doing? But perhaps your gut reaction this time is to be like, oh god, I don't want to talk to them. Your motivation, of course, your motivation to do things if you're in a particularly negative state of mind, your motivation might be reduced. If you're feeling quite on top of the world, a bit more excitable, a bit more energetic, it might be a bit higher. And lastly, your alertness. So are you quite dull to your environments? Are you quite like stable? The sensory stuff and the social stuff isn't getting to you as much, you might be a bit calmer. But if you do find yourself like really hyper vigilant and sort of tracking everything that's going on and nitpicking on and isolating different details of different social interactions and
What he's talking about now is now you're working up to a meltdown,
environmental
basically.
changes, then perhaps you might be a little bit more excitable or anxious. These are all things to really consider when you're trying to improve your emotional awareness. And it's not the easiest thing to do. But what can this look like? If we take the example of our usual level of emotional awareness or alexithymic awareness, being the red line, perhaps with logging these physical, behavioral, and thought things over a long period of time and really embedding them in our way of sort of monitoring our own emotional state, we reduce that line by just a tad. And so throughout the day, you know, when we're thinking, do we need to breathe? You know, perhaps the first time we might be like, no, we don't need to breathe, I don't feel very anxious. And the second one, usually, you'd probably still not be able to tell that you're anxious or increasing your anxiety. And so you don't breathe again, you don't do those techniques, those exercises to calm yourself down. And then you get to a point where it gets too much and you have a meltdown and everything goes wrong. Perhaps if you increase that or reduce that threshold for telling how you're feeling through these different physical, behavioral, and thought-based things, the next time you ask yourself, do I need to breathe, on the second time, you might be like, oh, actually, maybe I do need to. I'm noticing my heart rate's a bit up, I'm feeling a bit like sweaty, my hands are a bit clammy, I'm thinking, I'm worrying a lot about things, I'm, you know, my head.
And I if I notice those things, I just start thinking about that I'm autistic and the situation and everything that's going on, and I figure it out that way. Basically I just deduct what's going on.
I'm sort of withdrawing a lot socially in this context. Maybe I do need to breathe and keep myself out of this. And then you go on to the next one, and then you notice your anxiety's risen again, and you're like, okay, I need to breathe, I need to regulate. I'd say that this has a lot more impact on me in those extreme novel situations. And for a lot of people, maintaining these sort of blanket methods might not be as easy. You might be a bit inconsistent. I know that specifically for me, when
If it was easy, it wouldn't be called alexithymia. There wouldn't be a diagnosis. That's all there is to it.
health gets bad when I need them the most.
Well, actually, alexithymia really isn't technically a diagnosis, I don't believe.
Executive function drops, and sometimes I don't upkeep the things that would generally keep my anxiety to a minimal level. If you are going to sort of get a bit more of a grasp on your emotional regulation, really consider both of these. Consider the blanket methods that I've talked about. Consider trying to get a bit of a self-profile of your own signs, your own thoughts, your own behaviors, your own bodily signs. Might allow you to do things outside of your routine.
Get mental health. Get mental health that is familiar with working with autistic people. That's one of the best things to do. Identify the problems, whatever they are, is essential.
Routine that you wouldn't usually be able to do because you already have those inbuilt sort of ways of noticing if you're getting a bit too overstimulated. This was particularly quite important for me when I was traveling. I was backpacking around with a backpack, of course, around Southeast Asia for about 2 weeks, for a month rather, 2 months I think actually. And we were never in the same place for more than 3 days. And there's a lot of change in that, and there's not a lot of consistency, there's not a routine, I can't always exercise, and so I really needed to rely on myself.
But that becomes the routine also.
To notice if I wasn't feeling good and to take a break. So if this has helped you, please make sure to like, subscribe, and if you want me to continue making more of these instructional videos, consider becoming a member.
Alrighty, well, this is Thomas Henley, unraveling alexithymia, the key to meltdown prevention. I don't have a lot more to add right now on this. I hope this has been beneficial. This is David Page. Screw them, flap harder.